I've said this before. I think my kids and grandkids will price things in Satoshis. How many, that sandwich, oh, that's 5 Satoshis or whatever it is. I just think these other monetary things will go away. And the reason I say that is that, humankind has this history of when you find something better, everyone kind of migrates towards it. It could take time. I mean, this isn't, money touches every part of society, and it's very, very viral, and it's got a huge network effect, and it's got a huge, Lindy effect going backwards, so that the dollar's got tons and tons of momentum. So we're not going to turn this thing over in 5 years or 10 years, but in 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that Bitcoin will be kind of the true north monetary standard.
Every few centuries, a breakthrough technology emerges that reshapes the very foundation of civilization: the printing press, the combustion engine, the internet. And now Bitcoin. But this isn't just a new asset class or a digital novelty. It's a real-time monetary revolution. We are witnessing the rise of a new global standard, an incorruptible, decentralized, digital form of money with the potential to replace today's fragile fiat system. Bitcoin is doing to money what the internet did to information. And much like the early internet, most people still have no idea how transformative this shift will be. This time, the disruption won't just affect your inbox or browsing habits, it could upend the value of your savings, your national currency, and the entire global financial system. Central banks are trapped in a debt spiral, printing endlessly to sustain a system built on leverage and short-term political fixes. As fiat currencies continue to lose purchasing power, capital is migrating toward Bitcoin, the only monetary asset with absolute scarcity. What Lawrence Lepard is describing isn't a fantasy, it's a blueprint. When he talks about his grandchildren pricing goods in Satoshis, he's envisioning a world where Bitcoin is not just an investment, but the global unit of account. That future may still be a decade or two away, but the momentum is real. Institutional adoption is accelerating, capital inflows are rising, and trust in fiat is crumbling. As history has shown, when a society discovers a superior form of money, the shift becomes irreversible. Bitcoin is that superior money. In this video, we'll break down why Bitcoin is rapidly emerging as the next monetary superpower, and how the coming decades could mark the greatest wealth transfer in modern history. Cybercriminals are getting smarter, and everyday investors are the new target. You worked hard for your crypto. Don't lose it to a scam. Recently, attackers bribed offshore agents at major crypto platforms, stealing names, birth dates, even social security numbers. They drained real accounts in seconds. No blockchain hack, just human error. Once it's gone in crypto, it's gone. That's why ITrust Capital created the Premium Custody Account, the most secure way to protect your asset. It's a closed-loop system, meaning funds can only move between you and your account. Even if someone gained access, they can't steal your crypto. Backed by institutional-grade custody at no extra cost. Sleep easy knowing your investments are locked down. Click the link, use code DOSE7, and get a $100 funding bonus. Start protecting your future with ITrust Capital.
When 2008 occurred, what it really was a big socialist experiment for the banks. I mean, the banks should have failed. They should have let everything fail, but of course they took the view that if they did that, the whole economy would enter another depression, and they might have been right, but and so they bailed everything out, and they did it with printed money and 0% interest rates, and we printed money before. They printed money, in the Depression. They printed a little bit in World War II, after World War II, but I mean, this level of printing was just like an entirely new order of magnitude, and they've had 0% interest rates before. They were briefly that low in the Depression, but since that time, they've never been that low, and it's just an enormous distortion of capitalism to do those two things. I mean, it just turns everything on its head, and as the book describes, it actually makes the system incredibly unfair to those who aren't, near the money printer or don't have the ability to borrow cheap. I mean, I think one of the greatly unjust things in our society is that Wall Street can borrow at prime, and sometimes prime is as low as 0 or 1 or 2%, and that the average person has to borrow from these credit card companies that are charging 25%. So it's just usury. I mean, we used to have usury laws. There used to be a cap on how high interest rates could go, but we don't have that anymore either because, frankly, the banks own the place. So it's an unfair system, and that really makes me angry because I see the country I grew up in, and it was a fairer, better country than the one that my 20-year-old kids are growing up in. Yeah, Ron Paul was a key for a lot of us. I was a big supporter of his, and of course everything he did was based on Austrian economics. And so once you go down that direction, you start reading Rothbard and von Mises, and you really kind of understand that, oh my God, this, we've been living in this broken system that's really kind of a lie, and it started in 1913 with the creation of the Fed, which is really just a money cartel set with price fixing and to benefit the rich. And then it got monstrously worse in 71, because at least until 71 there was some loose link between gold and the dollar, and of course when Nixon broke that, then all hell broke loose. And one of my favorite charts in the book is early on in the book. There's a chart that shows kind of inflation from 1789 to 1971, and it's going up for sure, but it's little blips, and they tend to be around wars, and they were somewhat self-correcting. And then in 71, the thing just takes off like a rocket ship and goes straight up. Yeah. And so, because when we went on a total fiat money standard, government determined they could print whatever they wanted. There really are just no restraints. I mean, and that's only proven, to be worse and worse. I mean, I thought the COVID print was pretty amazing. I thought the amount they created was amazing. I thought the increase in the expenses was amazing. And what happens, and this is the part that's so interesting, Rob, is it's like a ratchet. It never goes backwards. The expenses that so like in 2008, there's a good example. So 2008, all right, well, we had to save the banks. We had to print this money. We had to drop rates to zero. I get it. Okay, so now it's 2011. The banks aren't close to dying. The economy's kind of working. It's not robust, but it's working. Why are we continuing to keep money at zero? Why are we continuing to do QE? Do you know what I mean? Why aren't we, and the answer is the system's broken, and they wanted to benefit the insiders and reflate the system. And same is true with COVID. I mean, they printed all this money, and they spent a ton of money. The government spending in COVID went up a couple $1 trillion, and you would think, all right, I get that, but maybe after COVID was over, you'd take the spending back down again, right? Because we're not in an emergency anymore. But no, and we ratcheted. That's now the new baseline, and it's only going to get bigger. So, it's just it's what Lynn says. I mean, the train isn't stopping, and they just, sadly, the government, the structure of the government we have, is just going to make this thing worse and worse until it kind of completely comes off the rails. And that's because nobody's willing to face the elephant in the room, which is that we're bankrupt. We can't, and we're living off credit cards, and we can't keep spending more and expect it to last. Yeah. And eventually, there's a chapter in the book, as you know, called Stein's Law. If something can't go on forever, it's going to end. Well, it feels like we're getting closer and closer to that end point.
Do you think that the Fed is a evil institution, or is it just a bunch of 12 guys sitting there think they're doing the right thing for the country?
It's mixed. I mean, I think it's evil in the sense that I think they're smart enough to know that they can't do what they're trying to do, and they like the power they have. And when there's a part, where Greenspan says he really enjoyed being the power of being the Fed head, and I'm pretty sure Jerome Powell likes that too. I mean, so I think these guys are too smart not to understand the implications of what they're doing, and that they're kind of working for the insiders. And then post being on the Fed, they go out and they get huge fees. I mean, Janet Yellen gets $7 million of speaking fees. I mean, what does she have to say that's worth $7 million? I mean, that's just kind of a backdoor bribe. So, I mean, first of all, the one thing I will say, some people say, well, what would you have done if you were in the Fed? How could you do it? I mean, nobody, God himself couldn't do the Fed well. I mean, the interest rate should be a market set rate, and what it does is it should balance the supply of savings with the demand for investments. So interest rates should be discovered in the free market. There really shouldn't be, a Federal Reserve. I mean, the whole notion and the fact that there is a Federal Reserve is what got us into all this trouble, because, by backstopping the banks, it led to perpetual inflation. It said to the banks, just party on, don't worry about it. If things go wrong, we'll print money to bail you out. And so we've been in kind of a perpetually inflationary environment, which, in the 70s it blew up a lot, but Volcker got it back under control with high interest rates. 80s and 90s, we had some really good productivity gains, and we were, in a deflationary trend in terms of interest rates, so it was less noticeable that we were inflating. But now it's turned the other way, and as in the last cycle we had inflation of 9%. I mean, I think this next cycle up is going to be higher still. So, and I don't see. If something were changing, if I saw fiscal responsibility in Congress, or, an adult conversation about saying, we've got to reduce some of these entitlements, or an adult conversation about saying, we're spending way too much on defense. We could accomplish the same objective with less cost. then I would think, well, all right, maybe it's not, a broken system. Maybe we can fix it. But to be fair, you just don't see any of those things happening. I mean, again, when I was writing the book, I was last year, as you'll recall, we had a presidential election, and I was watching Team Blue and Team Red argue with each other, and I thought, these guys are arguing about all this stupid stuff that doesn't matter, and there's a bigger problem here, which is the monetary problem. I mean, you had a debate between Kamala and Trump, and nobody mentioned the debt. I mean, nobody. It's probably the biggest threat to the country right now that exists, and yet it's kind of kicked off into the side of the room, and nobody's talking about it. Even Trump and Warren are saying maybe we should just get rid of the debt limit. And they probably will. I mean, it's always been kind of a joke anyway. But I mean, the point is, they'll try. Witness Doge. I mean, noble effort. Good aims, et cetera, et cetera. But even Elon got fed up with it and said, you just can't do this. I mean, it's just not going to work. It's also just baked in the cake, and it's a very, very broken system. And so I think the history of broken systems like that is they'll run as long as they can until the whole system implodes, and then we'll be forced to restructure it, based on sound money. At least I hope it's based on sound money. If we don't, then the pain's going to continue.
What happened in 2008 wasn't capitalism, it was crony socialism for Wall Street. A system that should have corrected itself through defaults and bankruptcies was instead papered over with trillions of dollars in printed money and 0% interest rate. Once those emergency measures were introduced, they never went away. As Lawrence Lepard explains, it wasn't just a bank bailout, we rewired the entire monetary system to reward debt, speculation, and closeness to the money printer, while punishing savers, wage earners, and the middle class. That decision triggered a chain reaction that distorted every aspect of the economy. Cheap capital inflated asset bubbles, widened the wealth gap, and created a perverse incentive structure where failure was rewarded and responsibility ignored. As Lepard puts it, this isn't just poor economic policy, it's a moral breakdown. Wall Street borrows at 2%, while average families are buried under 25% credit card interest. The system is rigged, and it's rigged by design. Reformed hedge fund manager James Lavish summed it up perfectly in a tweet. Governments will not stop spending. Central banks will not stop printing. Bitcoin will protect you from the consequences of both. There is no political will to fix this, entitlements can't be cut, military budgets are untouchable, and tax revenues can't keep up with runaway spending. That's why the Federal Reserve always returns to the one tool it truly has, the printing press. In this environment, Bitcoin isn't just a speculative investment, it's an exit strategy. It's the lifeboat floating outside a system that is mathematically destined to collapse. Fiat currencies are racing to the bottom, while Bitcoin stands alone, programmed with scarcity, immune to political manipulation, and increasingly adopted by individuals and institutions alike. When the next phase of the crisis hits, and it will, Bitcoin won't just survive. It will become the foundation of what comes next.
A guy gave me a business card with an internet address on it in 1993, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's my internet address." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, you know what the internet is?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, imagine if you could, at the time there was something called Novell, which had local area networks. You could hook up your PC to other PCs in your office with a coax cable." He said, "Well, just imagine if you had Novell and you could send email to everywhere in the world." I was like, holy shit, that's a really big idea. And so I just went and bought everything I could in the internet space, private companies. It worked out very well. But I think, by the way, I think that's helped me in terms of understanding Bitcoin, because I see the parallels are very substantial. They're both networking businesses. There was a lot of skepticism. I remember when I was buying all those things, people were like, what is that? I don't get it. No, you don't need that. I mean, remember what, Krugman said and so forth. So, but I could see that it was going to change the world. It was really going to be an important thing. And so, so there's a certain amount of pattern recognition where, this next network, and the monetary network that Bitcoin is establishing, it reminds me so much of the internet. It's almost like deja vu. So, I think what you want to try and find is a technical change that's unique and different, that brings some real value, and then, increased adoption, what I always call dogs eating food. So year over year, more people are using it, implying that it's a good thing. And, and then you get into these adoption curves. I've got a few of them in the book where it just kind of shows, and it goes back quite a ways. I mean, washing machines, cell phones, computers, whatever it might be. You get your early adopters who are testing it, and the things are clunky. It doesn't really work that well. And then it gets better and better, and the technology keeps improving, and pretty soon everybody has it. It's just like obvious. How can you live without a cell phone? The original phones were flip phones. Hell, the original phone was the one that Michael Douglas had in Wall Street with a big brick that he was carrying around on the beach. My boss had one of those, and I remember at the time that the per minute rate was like $1.50. So, and he was an important guy, and occasionally he had to do things, and so he'd get on the phone and he'd make a 10-minute phone call for $15, and from anywhere, and that was cool. And think about what that is today. I mean, we all have phones. We can make calls all around the world, for $30 a month. I mean, effectively, it's free almost. So you just kind of look for these technology trends that are emerging and more usage. And in the Bitcoin area, I mean, that's one of the things I look at most carefully is how fast is it growing in terms of users, applications, adoption. And I've seen nothing that indicates that it's slowing down. In fact, I would argue it's the other way. It's kind of accelerating, modestly, but accelerating. And so, that tells me that, just let this play itself out. And I think most people in the world now know what they've heard of it. You'd have to be living in a cave. Well, in the Western world, I should say, in the developed world, you'd have to be living in a cave to not be aware that Bitcoin exists. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the people that know that they need it, the percentage of those people who know that it exists, that then also understand that they really need it. I mean, still, what has it got to be? 1%, 2%, 5%? I mean, it's small, right? Yeah. And I think that what's going to happen is, the part that doesn't know they need it, they're going to learn that they need it. And so as they do, and because, we've got this, it's fixed in supply, as as everyone knows, and nobody's ever seen anything like this before, because all the commodities, the supply will grow if the price goes up. Well, this is one where the price will go up and the supply won't grow. Mm-hmm. The supply's algorithmically set at 21 million coins. Price can go to wherever, it doesn't matter. There aren't any more of them. So yeah, I mean, that's why I think Saylor's insight that it's going up forever, Laura, to me, that's one of the hardest things for people who are looking at it for the first time to get their arms around. I mean, I can't tell you how many friends I have who say, well, yeah, I know I should have bought it, but I didn't. You told me to, I didn't. But you bought it at 10,000, it's 100. How can I pay 100 for it? I'm paying too much. I'm like, you're looking at it wrong. I paid 10,000 for it. Max Kaiser bought it at $1. And in 10 years, if you buy it at 100 and it's at $1 million, somebody's gonna say, "Oh shit, I can't pay $1 million for it. You paid 100,000 for it."
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. Jeff Booth is a very strong believer that he's a friend, and he's a very strong believer that we've absolutely got to get the medium of exchange piece going, because it just gets it inside everybody's head. To be frank, I'm kind of with Saylor right now. It's just pristine digital capital. It's digital gold. The medium of exchange thing isn't that important, but so I can see both sides of this argument. I think that it will become, first of all, it's growing as a medium of exchange. I mean, all the Bitcoin shows I go to, I just buy things out of my Strike wallet, on Lightning. And you're seeing more and more medium of exchange use cases. So and in third world countries, actually, it's pretty heavily used as a medium of exchange. There's a part of my book where I talk about Nairobi, where, they've got a terrible currency and a lot of people are conducting their lives on a Bitcoin standard, using Lightning wallets. So it is there. The medium of exchange piece is there. And I think it will continue to grow as time goes by. And I think it's just another way that it'll creep into everybody's consciousness. I mean, and I think eventually it will be the medium of exchange. I think eventually the dollar will be gone. It'll be kind of a relic. And I've said this before, I think my kids and grandkids will price things in Satoshis. I mean, how many, that sandwich, that's 5 Satoshis or whatever it is. I mean, I just think these other monetary things will go away. And the reason I say that is that, humankind has this history of when you find something better, everyone kind of migrates towards it. And, now, it could take time. I mean, this isn't, money touches every part of society, and it's very, very viral, and it's got a huge network effect, and it's got a huge, Lindy effect going backwards, so that the dollar's got tons and tons of momentum. So we're not going to turn this thing over in 5 years or 10 years, but in 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that that Bitcoin will be kind of the true north monetary standard. Whenever anybody accepts Bitcoin, I pay in Bitcoin, and then I replace it with I take fiat from my. I mean, obviously we all have fiat accounts. You can't really live paying for everything in Bitcoin. It's very hard to do, but it's very easy to take my fiat, send it to my Strike wallet, and buy more Bitcoin. So yeah, I try to use it whenever possible, and I try, and I use it to orange pill people. I mean, I try to, people who don't get it. I mean, I find myself in a lot of service institutions, restaurants particularly, where I say, I said, well, I'm going to give you the tip, and here's, put on the credit card, but I'd like to give you a little extra tip if you learn about Bitcoin, right? And they said, what is it? Well, okay, so you got a phone? Yeah, okay. So here, download this Strike wallet. Okay, set it up. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Great. I'm going to send you $5 worth of Bitcoin to your Strike wallet right now. And it just plants the seed, right? And they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. How'd you do that? How'd that happen so fast? Right? I mean, it's so again, it's to me, we're racing because fiat and CBDCs are making the world a terrible place, and the governments are trying to push CBDCs, and we're kind of in a race with them. So we got to get as much of the world as possible to see our side of it and be using our side of it and recognize that this is the right way to go. I mean, as you alluded to those socialists who think the problem is, not enough government. We gotta show them, no, the problem is too much government. And here's how you beat it.
Beneath Lawrence Lepard's warnings about inflation, bank bailouts, and monetary manipulation lies a deeper threat: central bank digital currencies. For decades, governments have abused the privilege of money creation, printing excessively, borrowing endlessly, and inflating away your savings. Now, instead of reforming the system, they want to digitize control and call it progress. But CBDCs aren't about convenience, they're about surveillance. They enable governments to track, program, and potentially block your transactions based on behavior or policy. This isn't a future concept, it's already being piloted worldwide. As Lepard warns, we're in a race. One side is building a global financial surveillance system. The other is fighting to keep money free. That's why Bitcoin is more crucial than ever, not just as an investment, but as a lifeline. Bitcoin is decentralized, permissionless, and censorship-resistant. It can't be shut down. While CBDCs demand obedience, Bitcoin demands only understanding. Each new user who embraces it is one less subject to a controlled monetary system. The mission is simple: orange pill the world before it's too late. Help someone on board with Strike. Share a lightning tip. Spread the word. If CBDCs become the default, the window for resistance could close forever. Bitcoin isn't just better money, it might be our last shot at preserving financial freedom in the digital age. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.